Welcome back and good evening from Stoke Mandeville in Buckinghamshire, where after the Second World War, neurosurgeon Sir Ludwig Guttmann came up with the brilliant idea of a sporting contest to help rehabilitate veterans. Now, nearly three-quarters of a century later, the pandemic has inflicted new wounds, physical and emotional. Today, the Paralympics flame has been lit here, and with it the hope that the same post-war resilience can be rekindled. The first contest featured just 16 athletes. Next week, 4,500 from around the world will take part in Tokyo, though sadly athletes from Afghanistan have been unable to leave their country safely and will not be able to attend. Just before we came on air, I watched the flame lighting ceremony with British Paralympic rower Helene Rainsford. Helene Rainsford, who's the first ever Paralympic rowing champion, won gold in Beijing in 2008, is watching here in Stoke Mandeville with me. And those banners were made by local families and are being carried by the Aces Wheelchair Basketball Club. Helene, it's a scaled back ceremony, isn't it? But a really important one.
Absolutely. This really is the birthplace of the Paralympic Games, and it's really exciting with this year's delay that actually we're now off and the Paralympic Games are coming.
And, you know, just give us a sense of how the Paralympics has grown since that first event, the brainchild of neurosurgeon Sir Ludwig Guttmann, was held to help World War II veterans rehabilitate themselves.
It has grown immensely from 1948, where there was just 16 people taking part in archery, right through to today, where we have 4,500 athletes taking part from 136 countries. It's hugely grown, really diverse individuals and disabilities, whereas originally it was just spinal injuries, and a really exciting time now.
Well, we're building up now to the lighting of the Paralympic flame itself, and it's the fourth time, isn't it, Helene, that the flame has been lit here at Stoke Mandeville?
Indeed, it is. There was 2012 was the first time that it was lit here, and then we had a wonderful ceremony in 2016, and sadly in the last Winter Games we were snowed off a little bit and we weren't able to have many spectators, but it's really exciting to see it now finally coming into fruition this year.
There's some pretty hair-raising stuff going on here.
Is
it reminding you of your previous Beijing? Well, let's go Beijing 2008.
I have to say I didn't do anything quite as hair-raising as being thrown in the air whilst fireworks are going off, I have to say. But it is fantastic to see these athletes not being distracted by all of the fireworks going off. It's certainly exciting, paracheer. I've never seen it live before.
Right, now we're getting a glimpse now of the torches and the torchbearers, two torchbearers emerging here, two Paralympic stars, Susie Rogers, MBE, and Jane Blackburn, flanked by representatives of the Disabled Shooting Club of Great Britain. Helene, tell us about Susie Rogers in the front there and Jane Blackburn just behind her.
So Susie actually joined the British para swimming team in 2011 and was really motivated and inspired by Beijing 2008. She won a bronze medal in 2012 and a gold in Rio in 2016. She really was quite famous for her incredibly shocked face in the swimming pool when she realised she had won. A fantastic athlete. And as for Jane, Jane competed in the 1970s Commonwealth Games in Edinburgh just months after she became tetraplegic. And she won a silver medal in the table tennis singles, and then she went on to compete in 5 Paralympic Games in table tennis, archery, lawn bowls, winning 5 golds, 4 silvers and 2 bronze medals. Excellent athletes.
The torches were made from recycled aluminium, actually extracted from temporary housing units used in the aftermath of the 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan. I could see the flame now creeping up. It was a little bit reluctant. perhaps symbolic of all the uncertainties around this event, and it's struggled.
Indeed,
there
there
it
we
is.
go.
It's blazing
Beautiful.
nicely now. Quite reassuring to see that, actually.
Absolutely, yes.
We wouldn't have wanted the metaphor of the fire going out, would we?
No.
Not this year.
No.
When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what this storm is all about. Haruki Murakami.
That was the best-selling Japanese writer's words. Haruki Murakami wrote, "When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in." Helene, how has the pandemic changed you?
I think for me, it's opened many opportunities for me, just as other disabled people, in terms of things have become more virtual. So you're able to take part in employment and education easier. But it's also brought great adversity for individuals with disabilities who have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic.
The flame is now lit and the stage is set for what is going to be a thrilling and inspirational Paralympics.
Well, joining me now is rower Helene Rainsford, who won gold in Beijing in 2008, and Dave Clark, who had a 17-year career as part of the England and GB blind football team. Dave Clark, it's a really historic year, isn't it, for the Paralympics, this?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, you know, throughout the pandemic, it's been an incredibly challenging time for all disabled people right across the globe. And I am so thrilled and so grateful to the Japanese for carrying on with the Paralympics, and so excited about what's going to happen and unfold in 5 days' time.
Helene Rainsford, what are GB's best medal hopes in the Paralympics? We did pretty well in the Olympics.
We did indeed, and I think the Paralympics GB grew on our medal count from London to Rio, and it's really exciting to see what we will produce this year. We have many returning Paralympic champions and also some very good new faces, so it'll be very exciting to see who we have up on that medal podium.
Dave, you carried the torch into the stadium in London 2012. How difficult will it be for Paralympians without having the audience there in these pandemic years?
Yeah, clearly. I mean, the energy that you get from a crowd is remarkable. But you know, London was very much a turning point. You know, to have full stadiums was quite a remarkable thing and a real transformative thing that the Paralympic movement has taken forward. But I think we all realise that it is a reality of the post-COVID era that this is the position we're in. And of course, I think it would have been very easy to say, well, you know, let's wait till we can kind of do it with all incredibly brave and important that this event goes ahead. And I'm so delighted and so excited.
Helene, there's sort of special effort gone into making sure that the athletes enjoy the kind of morale-boosting effect of a crowd without the crowd actually being there, isn't there?
Yeah, we've really looked at Paralympics GB as to when the various elements came in of playbooks and how athletes have to, rules they have to abide by out there to make it COVID safe. We really looked at what's the impact for that for individuals, both for performance and physical and mental well-being. And we came up with strategies and consulted with athletes. So we have virtual spaces that athletes can meet one another as squads, and also places they can virtually connect with their friends and family. And many friends and family have supporter packs, so we're really looking forward to seeing those being put out online.
But unfortunately, Helene, the crowds aren't going to be there, but neither are the Afghan Paralympic team. That's a real sadness, isn't it?
It is, actually. When I heard the news, I was really felt very sad that actually normally the games are something that can cut through a whole variety of elements and crises in life. And it's really sad that those two athletes won't be with us in the games in Tokyo.
Dave, you've said how pleased you are that the games are going ahead, but there are a record number of COVID cases in Japan at the moment. The pandemic obviously hasn't gone away. It's a cliche to say that, but how difficult has it been looking back over the last 18 months for disabled athletes and people with disabilities more broadly?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's really important for everybody to realise that when the pandemic hit, you know, it hit disabled people very, very hard for lots of reasons. For those who were shielding, for a visually impaired person like myself who wondered where, you know, I was going to get food from as shopping slots weren't available, and worried about social distancing because how does a guide dog or how do I with a cane work out whether I'm 2 meters from somebody. And of course, there is a fundamental issue here that's actually equally important as the sport, which is that society simply isn't built from scratch to be accessible for disabled people. So of course, when there is a pandemic and when there's a whole host of new rules and regulations to fulfill, disabled people were kind of a second thought. So all of that has absolutely impacted. But I think that the Paralympics, in my opinion, is a global movement that's built from the very basis in Stoke Mandeville and has the power to influence and bring about that social change. And I think that inspire through sport is so important in getting disabled people's rights and needs and aspirations thought about up front when building society and just generally thinking about how society works.
Helene, have governments around the world forgotten about disabled people in the pandemic? Does it feel that way to you?
I think when you think about individuals even ahead of the pandemic, many people with disabilities, different cultures treat people with disabilities in different ways. Some it is seen as a sign of shame brought to the family, some are excluded from communities. And actually that's one of the things that the Paralympic movement hopefully can go and make change, bring great change through the new campaign, We Are the 15. We hope that we really can break down those barriers and change the stigma towards any individual with a disability. But the pandemic really will enhance those feelings.
And Dave, that new campaign, We the 15, to highlight the fact that 15% of people around the world have some form of disability. Given that scale, do you feel that governments have been too slow to really deal with your needs?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. As I said, there are many. The reason why accessibility issues crop up is simply that accessibility was not thought about from the beginning. As it affects disabled people. The reason why you can drive a car on the roads is because someone tarmacked them. That's accessibility. And so if you don't think about a whole group of people in how you create systems and how you create processes and how you create the built environment and how you deal with things like education, employment, health, and all those kind of things, and sport, then you're going to end up with something that actively excludes a huge proportion of the global population. And 15% of the global population is around 1 billion people. So, it's absolutely the right thing to do to make a lot of noise about We Are the 15 and bring about societal change, not just in the UK, but globally.
Helene, finally, the motto for the Paralympics is United by Emotion. Just wanted your emotions on this 16th Summer Paralympics as it prepares to get underway.
I think really, I hope that the Paralympics can be a real beacon of light, a real beacon of unity, and hopefully bring change amongst society, but also bring the world together globally as we hopefully will come out of the other side of this COVID pandemic.
Helene Rainsford, Dave Clark, thank you both very much for joining us. Well, earlier I spoke to the Work and Pensions Secretary, Therese Coffey, and I started by asking her how important the Paralympics were to provide a platform to people with disabilities who felt forgotten during the pandemic.
Well, I'm really looking forward to the Paralympics. It's going to be a fantastic event, and of course we're at Stoke Mandeville, the birthplace of the Paralympic movement. And what I really hope is that people will be inspired by the role models that are there, the true superheroes, as Channel 4 often calls our Paralympians. But I'm conscious that's why we wanted to make sure our national disability strategy had actions right across government so that people can be helped to fulfil their potentials too.
Were you disappointed that when that strategy was published, a Conservative peer, disabled peer, Lord Shinquin, said it was a damp squib, that it wasn't even a to-do list, but a should-have-done-by-now list? Have you not got a grip of this?
I think the strategy is really forward-leaning. We've always said that we want to make sure that we have an annual report and we can refresh it as and when it needs doing. But I think £1.6 billion of funding behind the 105 actions, I think it is, should make a difference to people's lives, and we want to keep working on it.
How are you going to close the disability employment gap? The fact that the employment rate for disabled people is nearly 29% lower than for non-disabled people.
Well, I think actually getting into work is a very fulfilling activity in itself, and you're right to highlight that we want to keep closing that gap. Some of the programmes that we have, like Access to Work, have helped a wide variety of people get into careers they never thought they could achieve. But it's important that we keep working on that through our different programmes. I'm conscious that quite a lot of innovation that's happened in the last year, I hope will help even more get people into the world of work or get back into the world of work. And that's an important part of our Green Paper too.
How sad are you that the Afghan Paralympic team has not been able to make it to Tokyo?
Well, I think it's a real sadness for those competitors who clearly wanted to make it to Tokyo, but I'm conscious that this is a difficult time for that country. But I'm sure there'll be further opportunities for those I think there'll be further opportunities for the Paralympians from Afghanistan to participate in sports more generally in the future.
Just finally, your cabinet colleague Dominic Raab is facing calls for his resignation for refusing to break his holiday to deal with the Afghan crisis. If you'd faced a crisis of similar magnitude in your department, would you have broken your holiday?
Well, I know that the government machinery has been working around the clock, recognising that this activity that's happened in Afghanistan happened a lot more quickly than people expected. You know, the plan was there, the plan has been put into action, it's been accelerated. I think what matters is that we are focusing on getting people out of Afghanistan in an orderly way, and it's important that we make sure we keep working on under that in order to help the people we've already identified, but also those others who are suggesting that they should be part of the Arab scheme as well as the broader refugee scheme.
You're breaking your holiday to do this, aren't you?
I'm really excited about being here in Stoke Mandeville for the torch ceremony and excited to go in Japan next week to see some of our Paralympians hopefully win as many medals, if not even more than they did in previous games.
You are on holiday though.
I'm looking forward to being in Japan next week, where won't be able to have a break while I'm there, but it will be fun to support our athletes.
Therese Coffey, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, our sports reporter Jordan Jarrett-Bryan is in Tokyo, where the build-up is beginning for the opening ceremony there next week.
Well, let me start off by telling you about the reaction and the reception that many of my colleagues in the media and the Paralympics GB athletes who were on our plane received when we landed here in Tokyo. It was phenomenal. We saw people waving flags, cheering, whooping, the biggest smiles you can imagine, because the reality that we have now seen is that the people here of Tokyo are so excited and so glad to welcome us and have us in their fantastic city, and so excited about hosting these Paralympic Games. Now look, it won't be the Paralympics we saw in London 2012. It won't be the Paralympics we saw in 2016 in Rio. It won't even be the Paralympics that we thought and hoped we'd get Tokyo 2020. But everybody here is working so hard with enthusiasm and the highest of energies to make sure that everybody taking part in these Paralympic Games does so and enjoys it and leaves these Games in no doubt this was the best possible Paralympics it could have been. But there is another reality here as well, that the COVID cases are on the rise here, concern for many people here in Tokyo and other parts of Japan. And I spoke to the International Paralympic Committee President, Andrew Parsons, earlier, and I asked him the question about how concerned he was about still having these games at a time when COVID cases are on the rise.
We do understand the frustration and concern and sometimes even the anger of some sectors of the Japanese population. If there are positive tests, positive results in the Paralympic population, meaning athletes, officials, they will be isolated. They will not contaminate, let's say, the Tokyo population or the Japanese population. So there is no correlation in terms of the rising numbers in Japan, which is a fact, is a reality, but there is no correlation with that, with the hosting of the Paralympic Games.
So like Team GB, Paralympics GB will not be putting any medal targets or expectations on Paralympics GB at these games here. The disruption leading up to these Paralympics makes it very difficult for them to really work out who's coming into these games on any kind of form. But there are a couple of new sports added to the Paralympic family. Badminton and Taekwondo are a couple of new sports where we're hoping to get some medals there as well as dominating in the usual sports like in the pool, on the track and in the cycling as well. Wall-to-wall coverage across Channel 4. The game starts on the 24th of August, and also More 4 will be your channel for all team sports, where you can catch me covering the wheelchair basketball and the wheelchair rugby.
Jordan Jarrett-Bryan reporting there from Tokyo. Well, from the team here at Stoke Mandeville and from John and the team back in the studio in London, that's Channel 4 News. We're going to leave you with some pictures from the day.
Great British weather.